Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you guys for joining us. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you guys are. We got a pretty spectacular group of gentlemen joining us for this panel. We're going to be talking about crossing the chasm and accelerating the drive from Web 2 to Web 3. I think this discussion is getting a lot of attention in crypto Twitter and even like mainstream media, like a lot of public discourse about what Web3 is really about. So we're got the experts, the builders, like the guys that are creating the plumbing and infrastructure that's going to be powering Web3. So thank you guys for joining us. We'll get started with maybe like a round of introductions. We'd love to hear about your guys' background, and of course, we'd love to learn more about the projects and what you guys are building. Maybe we'll start like in alphabetical order. Let's start with Ahmed. How's it going?
Hey, Sammy, very well, thanks. How are you?
Doing good. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Quick introduction. My name's Ahmed Balaghi, and I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Biconomy.
Great to have you with us. So, tell us about yourself, Ahmed. How did you get into the space, and what are you guys doing at Biconomy?
Absolutely. So, really, as for myself, I've been in the space for the past 5 years. I've worked across different projects such as Metaverse, which was a concept which was devised by this project many years ago, but was a bit too early for its time. So I was sort of helping in business development, doing blockchain research, and also was doing crypto investments out of a VC in Dubai a couple of years back. And it was only around 2.5 years ago where I came with my co-founders to start Biconomy, which is a which is a multi-chain transaction infrastructure for Web3. And it's all about how we can make Web3 as seamless and as easy as possible. And it's all about sort of removing transaction complexity at sort of the different layers in sort of this multi-chain context. So that's a bit about what we're doing at Biconomy and a bit about myself.
Awesome. Yeah, I think like transaction fees and those types of friction points have been talked a lot about in the last 1 year, I think, and I think it's still like definitely a problem that needs to be addressed. And I know you guys are working a lot on that, so we'll definitely be talking a lot more about that. Harsh, how's it going?
Hey, Sammy. It's going great. I guess I also have to talk about the same thing. So, hey
Yeah.
guys, I'm Harsh from Ethereum Push Notification Service, EPNS for short. A bit about my background, like how I started in crypto. So, I started with the classic formula: buy high, sell low. But yeah, while that didn't work out, what I did was I created a arbitrage bot around it, and that started sending me weekly reports. And at that point of time, I haven't heard about that you could program on blockchain. But because of those weekly reports and because of them picking up a lot of coins, a lot of tokens, I knew that you can program money. Woohoo for that, by the way. With that in mind, joined a fintech company. They were doing P2P and meta transaction and aggregate identity. But that's like old news. Around the beginning of 2020, I wanted to become a decentralized entrepreneur. So started trying to see, if Web3 still has any pain points. Turns out it did. Everyone went for speed, scalability, and security. Nobody went for communication, which we all love via notifications that come on our phone. And that's what we do in short. In the short description possible. So yeah.
Awesome. Thanks a lot. Great to have you with us. Let's go to Lewis. Lewis, how's it going? Thanks for joining us.
Good. Hi, everybody. Nice to be here on this panel. Yeah, so for myself, I'm Luis. I'm co-founder and legendary member at Gelato. I started Gelato in 2019, so like almost 3 years ago, with together with Hilma back then, in the depth of the bear market. Before that, I was in crypto too since 2017. Also had my fair share of buy high, sell low, like harsh here. Not financial advice, but yeah. So I mean, by 2019, I was already like a Solidity developer. And basically, back then there was nothing to do but to build. And we just kind of stumbled, like we worked closely with Gnosis. They had a decentralized exchange, and we tried to build something for them, and then realized that in Web3, quite very different to Web2, you don't have any like transaction automation or automation in general. Because usually in Web2, the big framework is that there's like a server, right? Like software as a service is the big framework there. So some company like Google, Facebook, or your bank, they have servers, and they can do like, they have power over all of your data and your transactions. And they just, the nice thing about this is that they can automate for you. They provide very good UX for you, right? But with Web3, all of this is gone, because now you are in power of your private keys, and that's supposed to be this way, right? You're self-custodying your funds. So, but you don't necessarily run your own server, right? Especially if you're not technical. So now basically that's what we discovered in early 2019, and then we just kind of developed Gelato as this general protocol and framework for decentralized server architecture, so that any dev developer can use Gelato to build like basically transaction flow automation, whether that is deferred in the future, like a limit order, or in real time. Just to basically send transactions across networks and have that be done by like a very reliable decentralized network of bots, instead of running their own bot and being the centralized point of failure. That's basically what we built with Gelato.
That's super cool. I think that like creates such a new and wide design space for developers to have this kind of like automation and like decentralized applications perspective. Definitely looking forward to getting into that more with you. Tom, how's it going? Nice to have you with us.
Yeah, hi, Sammy. Thanks for having us. It's really a pleasure to be here. So my name is Tom. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Parsec. And
I think Tom's connection is getting a little bit. We'll come back to you, Tom. I think there's a little bit of connection issues there. All right, no worries. While Tom's getting sorted out on the connection, let's jump into it. So I think the topic that we're talking about today, like obviously a lot of discussions happening about it, a lot of debate going back and forth. I think for all of us here and like many of the listeners, I think it's the idea and the promises around Web3 is what's really like driving people and creates a lot of passion for people in this space. So I wanted to start off by asking, like, what do you think are the defining characteristics and the big differences between the legacy Web2, the internet that we know and love today, and what is the potential in Web3? So maybe we'll go in reverse order this time. Lewis, would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. So I think I already touched upon this in my intro, but I think one of the defining differences between Web2 and Web3 is property control, property rights. In Web2, basically, you as a user and even as a developer, especially as well, give away all of the control to basically a very small set of companies. Usually that's Google, Facebook, Tesla, Amazon, right? As a developer, for example, you usually have to deploy your app on iOS and have it in the App Store, or Android, right? So what if Apple doesn't like your app for some reasons? They can shut you down next day. This already happened with Twitter apps early on. I think a lot of people build cool applications on Twitter, and then Twitter just shut down their APIs, and all of these developer entrepreneurs are basically deplatformed and had their business lost from like one day to another. So that's huge for Web3, this concept where basically you as a developer are way more powerful, because if you deploy on BSC or on Ethereum, right, you are the true owner like of that application. No one can take it down. It's a decentralized hosting service basically, and that thing will be available to your users, and you have way more power there. And then from a end user's perspective, you can think of it this way, that, for example, a very simple example with like a bank, right? A bank account technically it's just some number in a database in some COBOL bank server somewhere, right? Like that runs some code from the 1960s. that is your money. That's crazy if you think about it. Like, so basically, if the bank wanted to, or if they got hacked right from one day to another, they could completely change edit this database and decide what your balance is. That's crazy, because like in Web3, this is not the case anymore. You are the true owner of your NFTs or of your funds. And given the security of these networks, which have never been hacked, really, like the major decentralized blockchains, right? You can be very, very sure that with a huge probability, basically, no one else but you can control your funds or your data, for that matter. So it's basically really about decentralization, like basically of custody of funds and ownership of data. To move it away from like a very centralized locus, like Facebook, Google, whatever, and move it to every user, so that everybody is like the true owner of their funds and their destiny, I guess, in this sense, if you want to be esoteric about it.
Yeah, that's a very cool description. I think today, like, users really are increasingly aware about what are the different types of issues that happen when you have these types of super powerful gatekeepers, especially when it comes to personal data. And today, users really understand the importance of self-sovereignty of data and all types of assets. Tom, welcome back. So I think you had a little bit of connection issues.
Yeah, sorry about this. Hopefully you can see and hear me now.
Yeah, we can hear you now. I think you got cut off just while you were doing your introduction. Would love to hear a brief intro about yourself and about Parsec as well.
Yeah, sure thing. So my name is Tom. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Parsec. I have a background in traditional finance and fintech, and I got into crypto in 2017, which I thought then was late, but maybe it wasn't so late after all. It was the time of the golden bull run and a lot of hype, and I didn't do much investing, but I started researching the underlying technology behind that hype, which is blockchains and DLTs, and thought there has to be something there. And after that, I was convinced that this is the future, and that's when Parsec was born. In 2018, I met my co-founders, and we figured that the blockchain data niche is untapped. There really is no good tool to interact with it. You had like Etherscan, which you could scour the blockchain manually, but nothing to really to work with blockchain data in real time at scale. And it has been quite a journey ever since. And Parsec is a blockchain monitoring and data infrastructure platform. It allows users to monitor any events across different chains in real time at scale and process that data according to the user's conditional logic and push it to any centralized servers or centralized applications for further actions.
That's super cool. Could you give us some examples of how people are using Parsec today?
It has a lot of use cases. So it has B2B and B2C use cases. If we're talking about B2B, then a lot of protocols and decentralized applications are using it to stream the data, which is happening on their dApps, on their protocols, to their user-facing front ends, which are centralized. And this is the whole premise behind Parsec, to connect data from these decentralized networks, which are isolated and siloed from the rest of the centralized world, to centralized servers, so that users who want to interact with it and see it can actually do so. In terms of B2C use cases, we have users using it for trading, to monitor Uniswap or PancakeSwap DEX transactions, like swaps, liquidity adds, liquidity removals, and react to them, because Parsec can notify you of these things at the earliest level of confirmation. So that gives an edge to like arbitrage traders and a lot of other use cases as well.
Very cool. So going back to the topic of the discussion today, I think we got a really great insights around and perspective around what Web3 is and some of the potential there. But I think in order to get there, there's also like some still quite fundamental technology challenges and other challenges as well. So wanted to get some more perspective from you guys as well around what do you think are the current, like the biggest challenges that need to be addressed in order for us to realize this future state of the promises around Web3? Maybe I'll put the question first to Ahmed.
Yeah. No, thanks a lot, Sammy. Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that there are just heaps of challenges right now within crypto. It's, we're such, I mean, again, like it's very, it goes without saying, but we all know that we're still so early. When we see applications maybe like, Axie Infinity and others, which just have, let's say, 750,000 daily active users. I know I'm just saying but again, in the normal application world, Web2, this is like not a really high number. And it's something that, we're still so far away from seeing millions and millions of daily active users for a particular, Web3 application, right? And I still feel like a lot of the solutions that are, being built out, still really address the under the 1%, of the population, right? Like in the sense of, that there's a huge market out there for 99% of the world that still do not understand much of really what's going on. Especially when it comes to like just setting up a simple wallet like MetaMask, understanding private keys, going through that whole process. I definitely, and when I sort of look at these challenges, I definitely have it in two buckets. There's the user challenges and then there's the developer challenges. And this is also how we started at Bioconomy, sort of looking at both these segments. And it's quite clear that the user experience is quite clunky, and in anything that they could do on just one particular chain. And if they have to go multi-chain, it just becomes even more clunky, right? They have to set up different wallets. They need to change the RPCs, or there's no sort of real standard in anything that we're seeing. And then of course when we look at sort of developers, they a lot of the things that developers had to do, in many cases many years ago, is they had to build a lot of things from scratch, right? And this is why, with what we're doing at Bioconomy, or what EPNS, Gelato, and Particle are doing, are really building these sort of tools and platforms that don't really need the developers to sort of reinvent the wheel, right? So they could just sort of plug and play using solutions that they need for their particular purposes. And it's much like how we see in the traditional Web2 world. You see applications like AWS, Twilio, HashiCorp, all of these, Datadog, all of these like really, middleware companies that not many average people know about, but developers actually rely on. These need to also become robust, right? Like, we're all like hustling day in, day out to ensure that our platforms become robust so that developers could also rely on them. But of course, in a decentralized way. And so it's one of those things where, we're still in that, I'd say we're still in that, let's say, era where, if you think about the Wright brothers, for example, they built an airplane, right? But there was no infrastructure to support airplanes, right? Where it's the same thing with crypto, right? It was like we saw Bitcoin, and then we saw like all these other sort of coins coming, and some infrastructure came along. Ethereum came along as sort of infrastructure, and then exchanges came. Like we're still in this sort of battle between the end product and infrastructure, right? And I really feel like the year of infrastructure will come very soon, and that would enable even more use cases and more end users to come into these applications. So I still feel like that tit for tat between, let's say, the plane and infrastructure, or just end users and the UI and infrastructure, is still at odds, and we're not really there until we get to that mainstream adoption.
Yeah, definitely agree. Like a lot of very important points there. I think like while the infrastructure layer is still fairly nascent and still being built out by a lot of great teams, including all of you guys for sure, there are still a lot of developers that are kind of like pushing the limits of what's available today from an infrastructure perspective.
Yeah.
Because I think the appetite and demand from users is growing much faster than kind of what the infrastructure can currently support. was keen to get your thoughts on that as well, Harsh. Like, what do you see as like the big challenges that need to be addressed here?
Got it. I mean, Ahmed put it really well. Like the plane is built, the infrastructure is lagging. Uh, whenever we interact with Web2 world, and I draw a lot of conclusion from looking at the patterns, we basically interact with a lot of protocols in Web2, even for this stream to happen. But all of them are invisible. Web3 still hasn't gotten to that point where everything is invisible. In fact, to the contrary, one action can at times become 10 actions. So, from my understanding, one of the most important thing that drives Web2, apart from, of course, automation and meta transaction, is communication. So communication, like a native communication for Web3, wasn't invented and wasn't built. So people couldn't really communicate, services couldn't really communicate if something has happened for their users. And these are not just on-chain data, like let's say Aave moves from V2 to V3, or Uniswap moves from V2 to V3, or Pancake moves from version upgrade, or have something they want their users to know. So the best case scenario for them was like going to Twitter and just talking about it and hoping that the users listen to it. That is kind of funny if you think about it. Like Twitter usernames, when you are on Twitter, you talk to Twitter usernames via Twitter. When you are email, you talk to them via email. But so funny that Web3, when you are a wallet address, you go and email someone, or you go to Discord to talk to them. So essentially, that's what we realized, that this communication layer, the Web3 native way for chat to come between wallet to wallet, or for services to interact with the users, will probably solve one part of the UX. Having said that, as I said, like all the protocols, they need to work together in a very invisible way for people to come from Web2 to Web3. It cannot be like, we made cars and all of a sudden that's an invention, but it's harder to drive them when you compare it with, let's say, a cycle or a bicycle. So it cannot be like that. Like innovation, adoption are two different beasts. And while we invented something very unique and very powerful, we now need to invent the infrastructure which makes sure that the plane can actually land and the plane can take off. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a super exciting area of development as well, like unlocking these type of communication type of possibilities, which obviously are not available, which are not really possible today. And even if you talk about like clunky user experience, I think we are going to quite quickly move soon to become like more ubiquitous or like seamless user experience, where even users just install their favorite browser extension or whatever it might be, and don't need to enter in custom RPC configurations to interact with their favorite app. That just becomes more freedom of choice for users to be able to like move their assets. And today I think that user experience is still quite clunky, especially it's a little bit it's not as inclusive as it really should be and needs to be if we're going to go to hundreds of millions and eventually billion users plus. I think a similar kind of opportunity area is also definitely on the automation side, and I think Lewis, you touched upon it briefly, but we'd love to jump into that a bit more. So if you're, it's for me, it's a kind of new area. I've looked at it a little bit, but would love to understand about how you would encourage developers to be thinking about that, whether it's in the DeFi space or what are the other types of applications, and how should developers really be thinking about how to leverage the type of tooling that you guys are building.
Yeah, so basically, I think every developer, even if you don't start out with a function in your smart contract that should be automated or can be automated, so maybe the simple use case is a DEX developer, like for example PancakeSwap, right? There, this application itself has a whole host of features which aren't available natively without something like Gelato, right? So I'm talking about limit orders. Everybody who's traded on Binance centralized exchange before will have set a limit order, right? This is very normal in the Web2 kind of land, where basically Binance will run some server and they will match your order once it can be matched against the market price, right, against the order book. So with a decentralized setting like PancakeSwap, this is not really possible, because on BSC and EVM, you can only really as a user click a button on the Pancake swap interface and send a transaction in real time. So you kind of restricted to what is there in real time. So what with Gelato, like you have like simple applications like an AMM, where using Gelato you can already add so many more cool features that weren't available to you before. Like for example, deferred transaction relaying, right? Like for automation, basically, sending a transaction to execute a swap when the price is right, so that the user can go on a holiday. They can, I don't know, be on a plane, not be connected to the internet, and still trade via a bot that runs on Gelato network, right? So normally Web2 companies like centralized exchanges do this for you. But in Web3, in order to achieve the same outcome, you would have to run your own script, which obviously is a very hard task. And even if you are like a 10x engineer, you might not want to do that, because then you have to build your script, maintain it, test it, and make sure it's always up to seize the window of opportunity. Whereas with Gelato network, you have like a specialized network that is exactly built for that, and that has like multiple bots running, so that if one of them goes down, there's still another one executing, right? So that's like for simple applications. But then even for bigger applications, I think even if you don't necessarily have a specific feature like a limit order that could be built by using Gelato for automation, there's usually a lot of like, you can call it DevOps, right? That has to be done for your smart contract application. For example, Furukombo uses us to auto compound certain like yield positions. Or if you, I don't know, want to withdraw something once a week or every day, or, reinvest something, harvest something, those like very kind of cron job, like time-based tasks. But once the application gets big, you will, as a developer, probably have a bunch of them. And that's also what you can use Gelato for. Actually, if you go to app.gelato.network, there's like a whole front end, which makes it super easy for you as a developer to just go there and create like one of these automations, which is time-based. So you can just plug in your contract address, the function you want to call, and how often you want to call it, and then Gelato will call this function for you in intervals. So this is like more kind of like small DevOps tasks that normally as a Web2 developer you also do with GitHub Actions, with Circle CI, like all of these very techy solutions that aren't like necessarily very sexy, but super important for a developer's workflow and for application health. Like we didn't have this in Web2, in Web3, right? And now with Gelato, like Gelato Ops, you can think of it as your equivalent to like Circle CI or GitHub Actions to kind of automate your development and DevOps workflow for your smart contract applications. And then in between that and more, there's like it's general purpose. Gelato is completely general purpose, open source, open kind of transaction platform. So you can build anything on top of it. Whatever you like, whatever needs a transaction, either today or like whenever, you can build some sort of application on top of Gelato to automate this transaction flow, and not have it be ultimately rely on either a developer or a user having to go online and click some buttons to do anything, right? Like this can be kind of abstracted away and outsourced to a network of bots to perform these tasks for you.
That's super cool. Yeah, I think like even if we talk about areas outside of DeFi, right? So like things like the metaverse, is super hot topic today, obviously. So I think they're obviously like even DeFi primitives and protocols like DEXs are going to be like foundational infrastructure for metaverse applications. But I think there as well you have a lot of opportunities to improve the user experience using automation tools like Gelato Network, not necessarily only in the DeFi space, but even for DeFi applications within the metaverse will become a much better user experience through that. Super interesting.
Yes, actually, talking about that, one of the most used use cases early on was like someone built an application for, I think it was called Gotchi Care, because some of these NFTs, they require like petting or something, right? So like this was one of my favorite applications. Some guy from the internet built like Gotchi Care, which used Gelato to automatically pet your other Gotchi every so often. Yeah. We actually ended up hiring the guy who built it, because he turned out to be some 19-year-old guy. It was amazing. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of weird use cases that I never even thought of. To be honest, I came a bit more from a DeFi background, but like there's so much application here for gaming, NFTs, and so on. Like, I mean, everything is a transaction on these networks one way or another, right? So
yeah, super interesting. Maybe we'll switch gears a bit, like go to Tom. I want to dig in a bit from a data perspective. So we were talking a lot about this paradigm shift or this change from the legacy Web 2.0 world moving into the emerging Web 3 world. What does that really mean from a data perspective? Like, what are the big challenges today, and what are the big opportunities that are to be unlocked?
Well, from a data perspective, so I firmly believe that to achieve mass adoption of blockchain and Web3, we need seamless bridges between decentralized network and centralized parts. Because even if we talk about dApps, decentralized applications, they still have like some parts of the dApps running in a centralized manner, whether it's front ends of those dApps or other parts, because it's simply too expensive to put the whole code on the blockchain. And until this is solved, I think it's extremely important to have like these bridges, which allow you to send this data from these decentralized networks, which are by essence like siloed and isolated, to centralized apps and centralized servers, because Web3 will not happen like in a moment. It's a long transition, and I think for a long time we'll see a hybrid version of decentralized systems and like legacy and centralized applications working together. And since blockchain data is it's massive, we have like terabytes of data. It's unstructured. It's sometimes even not fully visible, and it's difficult to extract actionable insight or actionable value from it. So this is sort of the something we are trying to solve with Parsec, to give everyone the ability to manipulate blockchain data streams, to actually extract some kind of useful information, automatically process it into a format that is useful, and send it to whichever centralized app or device or server or system that you need it.
That's a very interesting point. So I think when we talk about growing mass adoption, right? Like if we think about where we are today in terms of the total number of users, maybe in the low millions at best. We're talking about decentralized apps. So decentralized app users, whether it's DeFi or gaming or whatever that might be. I think I might mention, I think today Axie Infinity is around 1 million, but it's the largest number of users for any single dApp. So if we take everything combined, it's probably in the low millions. If we want to get to tens of millions, hundreds of millions, and then eventually 1 billion users or more, what are the kind of things from a technology perspective that needs to be improved or addressed there? Tom, maybe we could start with you on the same question.
Yeah, well, scalability is a big limitation of Web3 currently, because transactions are not always fast because they're decentralized, and they need to be processed by a miner and propagated through the whole network. So if we see like many more users entering the space and many more transactions, that's going to be quite a big hurdle to overcome, because of network congestions and everything else. Yeah, in my opinion, the good thing about crypto is that teams never stop building. We have a lot of great teams building scalability solutions, scalability apps, and like infrastructure, like economy, for example. So this is I feel it will take time. I mean, Web2 wasn't always this scalable as well, so it had its own issues. So it will take time, but we'll get there with the number of teams constantly building and shipping. I think over time we will be able to service the larger number of users who enter the space.
Yeah, I agree with you here. It's definitely one of the big challenges, but there is lots of great talent and engineers and people working on addressing some of the big problems. I think besides on-chain scalability, another one of the big issues that we touched on a little while ago, was around the user experience. So there are definitely tons of challenges to be overcome there. Harsh, would love to get some more inputs and perspective from you on how do you see that space playing out? Like, how do you see the user experience challenges being addressed and overcome in order to reach like this next stage of user growth?
Awesome. So user experience, I mean, we are all for it. One of the most important part of user experience would also be multi-chain communication and multi-chain composability, something which we recently did as well. But yeah, in terms of user experience, like it needs to get like 10 times better, even not 10 times, like 100 times better. Let me just give you an example. Like, let's say a user wants to place a limit order at this point. They cannot until they use Gelato. Let's say the user wants to pay gas fee and they don't have the native token of a particular blockchain. For Binance, let's say they don't have BNB. They cannot do it because again, there's an action that they need to do, that they have to have native tokens of a particular blockchain on which they want to transact. And these two problems alone, if a user wants to solve it, they have to go at least to 10 actions to get the native token, and then they can transact, and then at least visit the site 100 if not thousands of times just to get that limit order, and then only everything can be executed. So that's the clunky user experience of the past. That was before Gelato by Economy and EPNS and maybe Parsec came into the play. So let's talk about the new example. You want to place a limit order on PancakeSwap. Let's say you go to Gelato, you place your limit order that I want to only sell my tokens when the price reaches a certain point of time. At this point of time, Biconomy kicks in. You don't have native tokens, no problem. They can just use the tokens you have, which you are selling, and they can get your transaction out. And now this is a limit order, so it can fulfill at any point of time. So how will you be able to know that your limit order is fulfilled? Well, that's where EPNS comes in, because when your limit order is successfully executed, you will get a communication on your wallet address that, hey, everything works perfectly, and you can really do whatever you were doing before. You don't have to come to Web3 again and again to solve this problem. So this type of user experience is what I think will make the future of Web3 and will actually compete with Web2. And I think we are there in terms of tech now. It's just that we have to improve it just a little bit more to make sure everything else is accounted for.
That's a pretty awesome example. Like, I think we talked about a lot of challenges that still need to be addressed, but I think based on like the great work that you guys and your teams are doing, like this example clearly demonstrate like we're getting there really fast. Like there's awesome progress, like awesome opportunities and possibilities that can be done today. That's really cool. So we talked a lot about user experience, but I think if we also want to think about massive user growth in Web3, developer experience is equally important. I think that's really what's going to power that massive user growth and bringing in hundreds of millions and eventually 1 billion plus users into crypto. So we'd love to pick your brains, Ahmed, on how you see that area evolving. Like how important is developer experience for growing adoption, and where are we now, and what does that landscape look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we started by Economy, we first really asked ourselves what do developers need and want, and it's always been about how can we sort of create that the best developer experience. At the end of the day, they want to basically get on with whatever they're doing. They want to get on with the application. They want to sort of make things we want to make things as seamless as possible for them. Apologies, that's the phone. And can I just get that?
No worries, Ahmed. We come back to you, Ahmed.
1 sec.
No worries. Maybe Lewis, same question for you. I know you guys probably spend tons of time thinking about this topic, and you are largely a developer-facing tool. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. So definitely, like you said, Gelato is primarily a developer-facing tool. It's I guess network to developer if you want. But I mean, it's always can also be described with like the end user products like a limit order, right? Then it's easy to understand for end users. But yes, first and foremost, it's a network infrastructure for developers, similar to how developers can deploy their applications and run them on Heroku or Twilio, AWS. That's the same for Gelato. And I mean, developer experience is super important. I think part of the reason why so much was built and why this current bull run is going for such a long time is because we have things like Hardhat now, which makes Solidity development so much easier, right? And testing, and so many other great tools like Etherscan got a lot better. The Graph got does some good stuff there. I'm super excited to look into Parsec as well, EPNS, Bioconomy, like all of these things, they help a lot. And I think what's really important is just that developers don't have to learn so much anymore in order to build the applications. Right now, if you want to build like your application on crypto, you suddenly have to learn all of these new technologies because you kind of have to build everything from scratch. So that shouldn't be the case anymore. Like as a developer, in order to get like maximum efficiency and productivity, you should really like narrow your focus and make your product like the best it can be, instead of then also trying to build 3 other ancillary products that just make your product work, right? Like for example, before Gelato, as a developer, if you wanted to offer a limit order, you would also have to reinvent Gelato basically in order to do that. And that's like 2 completely separate things. And believe me, like even building Gelato is so hard in and of itself that it like certainly you don't want to build it just so you can serve one feature in your actual application. So yeah, I think like Ahmed also said, we are coming into like probably the year or the golden era of infrastructure projects. Especially now with multi-chain, like bridging and so on, all of this needs to be factored in, and there needs to be so much infrastructure, reliable infrastructure built for this, and cannot just be one project. There have to be a ton of projects and solutions to really like capture all of the needs that people have, and everybody does it a bit differently in their segment. So yeah, I think it's just crucial. Like I think one of the key metrics we should track actually is not necessarily the growth in daily active users, but more like in daily active developers, because we're still far from being able to support like mass user adoption, right? So that can only come if more and more developers ship, and if they can ship faster. And I think that's what we all kind of on this panel like focusing on and building towards to make that possible.
Yeah, I really love that. I think that's a metric we don't pay enough attention to. We talk a lot about daily, weekly active users, but we should really be looking more at like the daily active developers. Ahmed, wanted to come back to you. Sorry, I cut you off there.
No worries. Yeah, thanks for that. It's funny you mentioned that because I was living in Dubai around 2 years ago. I moved back to sort of London for personal reasons. I've come back to Dubai and attended sort of a DeFi meetup, and it's the first time I saw like many developers in like one space in the city, that's focused on blockchain, and I thought that was really cool. I was like, yes, this is exactly sort of the stuff, like people I wanted to sort of meet and see, because without the builders, essentially we really wouldn't have a market. And yeah, I pretty much agree with everything Lewis has said, because developers need as much tooling and as much support as they build, and it goes back to sort of that providing as much infrastructure for all these use cases and for all these channels to open up. And when like, just to give an example, I mean, for us, before Bioconomy existed, I mean, multiple projects had to actually build their own relay infrastructure in-house so that they could provide things like meta transactions, and they'd have to sort of inbuild certain customizations and be able to monitor it, although that's not really their expertise. And so right now, what we've been seeing is lots of really interesting DeFi applications, NFT applications, gaming applications, all using meta transactions in completely different ways, right? And we're still and it's like these developers are even giving us like different ideas of how they could utilize this according to how they would want to, make things easy for their end users, and also just for how they would want to integrate. And it's seeing like things like this whereby like just continuously building for the developer, and like what Lewis said, really, focusing on a particular niche and need will really help, in sort of creating even further, let's say, stickiness and further, need and support that the developers, actually want. And I would also want to sort of touch on the multi-chain aspect, because the multi-chain aspect is like this, like I'd say, elephant in the room, right? Like we kind of know, what needs to be done. Things need to be invisible. Things need to be easy. But the how is like everyone's trying to figure that out, and it's a really interesting problem and concept. And especially with Vitalik coming out, I think two or 3 days ago, saying, he's not as bullish on multi-chain because, of course, there's this huge risk on reorgs and 51% attack on chains. This could sort of affect things. But again, this goes back to, how infrastructure is built out to sort of support, let's say these strongest chains, these strongest networks, and have contingency measures for any, possible attacks are really what, would help also the space move forward, and for developers to use, to go into a multi-chain, let's say, roadmap and strategy very, very quickly. So yeah, I mean, like if, and what we've also seen and realized is that, as we've been building, there've been like suggestions from developers, right? Oh, why haven't you guys built this? And, this is how like one of our products like Hyphen came along, and it's now become a full-on product for developers itself. And so I think, it's going to be really interesting how each infrastructure will just have its own sort of, particular niche it solves, and it will add on, complementary things, ancillary services to that developers would need and want. And then like we'd use EPNS use us, Gelato use us, and vice versa. Like all of this is also going to be intertwined as well, in the background.
That's some really interesting points. I think definitely one of the big one of the key things that we need to continue doing is grow more developer adoption in this space, for sure. But even at the infrastructure level, we need people that are building out new architectures, new types of innovations around how these chains are going to be scaling. And even then, I think even the tooling and infrastructure needs to be battle tested, really pushed to its limits in order to sometimes break it and see how things work, or not sometimes. So definitely, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more innovations in that space.
So just one more point, Sami. Sorry. What I think is also going to be interesting is seeing like how decentralized all of these solutions will be in the future. Because like Lewis said, you've had sort of the graph, you've had Chainlink, you've had sort of other like core infrastructure that was needed for this sort of current bull run. And you now have like new things like Pocket coming into network, like, that's decentralized node infrastructure. And again, like we're going to be seeing it like, the harder the infrastructure is, the longer time it might take for it to actually come into play and become decentralized and become core. And I just feel we're just scratching the surface with, the current ones that have just enabled the bull market.
Definitely agree with you there. I think like we need more variety and choice around the type of infrastructure and tooling available for developers that can address different types of business requirements, different type of application needs. So I think that ecosystem is still evolving, and a lot more developments definitely coming and to look forward to. I think this discussion we could go on for ages, and definitely look forward to getting you guys back onto for a round 2 on this one. But would love to wrap things up shortly with your closing thoughts, as well as would love to hear about what the BSC community and your communities could look forward to from your teams in the coming year. Maybe we'll start with Tom.
Yeah, well, in terms of Parsec and our work with the BSC, we've seen quite decent growth in terms of developers and users coming to build monitoring triggers for the BSC network. and we've seen new use cases. But up to this point, we've been focused on monitoring real-time blockchain events like transactions and smart contract events. And so next year, the focus will be to be full suite, like full solution for blockchain data, period. So that includes historical data. So we will allow users of BSC, developers building on BSC, to come and pull data from any number of blocks, even millions of blocks, and run calculations on top of that data for analytics purposes, for any purposes. So this is something that I hope the BSC developer community keeps an eye open on, because I think this really, I don't think anything exists on the market exactly like this. It has some key differentiators in terms of what's out there right now. So we welcome you all to come and try the new products, new features of Parsec. And in general, yeah, I'm very bullish about the whole blockchain adoption curve. I think we've done a lot of work in the last couple of years, as a community, as a whole. Still a lot to do. Web3 is still pretty small compared to what it will be in some years. And I just want to thank everyone who is here, like builders like Gelato Economy, EPNS, for building out this tooling and infrastructure, which is essential for this mass adoption. And looking forward.
Super exciting. I'm sure a lot of the people listening are getting quite excited thinking about how they're going to be starting, how they're going to be hammering the archive node, and exploring a lot of interesting possibilities. Lewis, would love to hear from you. What's the Gelato team cooking?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I'm super excited as well for Parsec. I haven't looked much into it yet, but it sounds like especially this historical analytical data, we could definitely use it for Gelato, for like just the operations, as like network analytics and so on. Super cool. Yeah. So in terms of Gelato Land for 2022, I think the theme will just be growing like a lot, growing the network activity. We've recently seen like a huge spike in growth on networks like BSC and Polygon. So that will mean like scaling the network. So they're like, so we don't run into the same scaling issues that, I don't know, Ethereum did eventually and so on, right? So that's like a huge theme, scaling to the next, I don't know, say 100,000 or so transactions per day, maybe even 1 million. And then really a big theme also will be better documentation for developers, easier way of integrating Gelato. At the moment, I think part of the reason why, even though we've been around for 3 years, fully live, maybe 2 years, but why it still like takes time to really spread the network is because it's very hard to integrate with. So we will ship all sort of tooling to help with that, like Gelato specific tooling to help with that, and documentation. I think that's like a big part that's missing currently from our stack. And then in general, I probably like one of the bigger themes will also be like cross-chain relaying. We've already started this last year with Connext. So we're working closely with them and other bridge providers to basically, enable cross-chain asset transfers. That's, going to be super relevant in 2022. I don't expect like this multi-chain trend to slow down. If anything, it'll probably increase. That's I think what you can expect from us. Just probably also hopefully going to be integrated by a whole lot of more BSC applications. So I think like PancakeSwap is on the way and some others. So super excited to explore what other developers are in the BSC ecosystem, and hopefully they can integrate us and get something out of it.
Awesome. Where can the listeners go to follow the latest news and developments of Gelato?
So it's at Gelato Network everywhere. So you can go to our Twitter. That's where you'll find a link to our Telegram and Discord channels. And then in general, gelato.network, the website domain, is a good source with links. And then there's app.gelato.network. That's particularly good for developers because you can basically get started right away there with scheduling your DevOps tasks.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for the sharing. Super exciting roadmap. Ahmed, would love to hear from you on what's coming with Bikonomy. What's the great things we can expect?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, for us, we're really doubling down on both our products, Gasless and Hyphen. Gasless, we're sort of, there's quite a few improvements that we're doing on that front, especially on sort of the sort of the monitoring and the and sort of the scalability of it. And so that is something that we're sort of really improving. And much to what Lewis said, you know, there are some things that are just making it easier for developers. So that's going to, so yeah, that's going, there's going to be focus on there. Hyphen, we're going to actually be opening up, we're going to be opening up liquidity, and we're going to be sort of now introducing sort of this dynamic pricing model. So this will enable sort of Hyphen to sort of really be able to sort of, let's say, hit a couple of birds with one stone, really, in terms of like scalability and allowing more end users and sort of more stakeholders to participate in the network. And this will mean that we support more chains and more tokens way easier than before. So that's when we'll support chains like BSC right now for cross-chain asset transfers. And we're also very much working towards our protocol. So this is what we call a multi-chain relay protocol, which, you know, essentially is decentralizes our products and allows us to really operate in a sort of in this sort of environment where we have sort of these executors being able to basically call to have essentially these different, you know, cross-chain contract calls. And these are related to these cross-chain transactions as well as the gasless transactions. And really, we really want to focus on how gas could be abstracted away at a multi-chain context, which we think is going to be a huge UX barrier as we go multi-chain.
Awesome, super exciting roadmap. Thanks a lot, Ahmed. Last and definitely not least, Harsh, how's it going? Would love to hear what's in store with EPNS in the coming weeks and months.
Awesome. So, Sami, lot of exciting news. But yeah, before that, I just wanted to share our teaser video with the BSC folks out, kind of like the start of a drum roll. If you can play it,
Yeah,
that
we'll
would
get
be
it
so
up.
cool. Awesome. Hopefully you guys like the video. So yeah, guys, as I said, like multi-chain is a future. So Ethereum push notification service, there's a rebrand that needs to come. Think about it as everything push notification service. We are going to come on a lot of EVM compatible chains, starting with people who supported us from the beginning. So that means we are coming on Polygon and we are coming on Binance because those two peeps were super awesome and they supported us. And then, of course, to other blockchains as well. What it means is that, you know, this native communication layer we invented using which any dApp, any smart contract, or even any backend service can send notification or communication to wallet address will become a reality in 2022 for a lot of blockchains. We are already working with a lot of cool projects on Ethereum, including Uniswap, Aave, Gitcoin, and so on. And we already have started deploying on BSC as well. So hopefully we'll be working with a lot of cool projects over there also. On that note, I mean, it's not an alpha drop, but yeah, we are coming on Ethereum mainnet tomorrow. So really, really exciting things ahead for us and hopefully for you guys as well. Visit us at app.epns.io in case you want to check out the entire notification era and the communication era, or just follow us at EPNS Project on Twitter or Telegram, or just check us out at epns.io.
Awesome. Super exciting. Looking forward to seeing the launch tomorrow. Thank you guys again. Thanks. This has been a really awesome conversation. Really appreciate you guys taking time out to come and join us and the community here today. Thanks again. And thanks all the listeners for joining in.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.